Let's say goodnight to a bunch of countries.
Okay, good night China. Good night Canada. I already said Canada.
Yeah.
Good night Mexico. Good night Spain.
Good night, Japan.
France. Good night Italia. Good night
Greece.
Good night Israel. Good night Jordan. Good night Lebanon. Good night Iraq. Good night Iran. Good night Afghanistan. Good night Pakistan. Good night Tibet.
Istanbul! Good night, Istanbul!
Good night Turkey. Good
Constantinople.
Good night Amsterdam.
Good night, New Amsterdam.
Good night LA.
Good night, Kansas.
Good night Korea.
Good night,
North
Arkansas.
and South. Good night
North mostly.
Bangladesh. Good night Australia. Good night New Zealand. Good night the
New
Philippines.
Zealand? That's the second one.
No. Good night.
That'd be awesome.
Good night Saudi Arabia. Good night Egypt. Good night Sudan. Good night Chad. Good night Central Republic of Africa. Good night Congo. Good night South Africa. Good night Madagascar. Good night to the Guape or something like that islands. Good night the
Guadalupe?
Bahamas.
Good night, Okinawa.
Jamaica.
Good night, Guadalcanal.
Good night the place that they put the atomic bomb on. I don't remember what it's called.
Pearl Harbor?
No, that wasn't an atomic bomb. They just bombed them. No, there was an atomic bomb. We dropped an
you
atomic
say
bomb
Germany?
in Japan.
You didn't see I would say Germany yet.
Oh, good night Germany.
London.
Good night England. Good night Ireland. Good night Scotland.
Iceland and Greenland.
Good night
Alaska.
The DR. Good night Haiti. Good night Cuba. Good night Virgin Islands. Good night Argentina. Good night Chile. Chile actually. Good night Brazil. Good night Bolivia.
Good night, Yugoslavia.
Yeah. Good night Czechoslovakia. Good night Russia. Good night Antarctica. Good night
South Pole.
Ukraine.
Arctic Circle.
Good night Serbia. Montenegro. Good night Lithuania. Good night
We should
Hungary.
make a list of how many you said.
Good night the Netherlands. Good night Portugal.
Poland. Good night, Poland.
Yeah, good night Poland. Good night
30 seconds.
30 seconds. Good night I can't think of it anymore. Good night oh, Lao. Lao. Yeah. Good
Hong
night.
Kong. Good night, Hong Kong.
Hong Kong doesn't count.
What?
It's in a place. Good night Shanghai.
Good night, Taiwan.
Shanghai.
Taiwan. Good night, Taiwan.
Yeah, good night Taiwan. Good night, see you Japan.
All right, you're done.
No! Good night Papua New Guinea. Good night the Florida Keys. Good night
Bahamas.
Alaska.
I said that.
You did?
Yeah.
Good night South Pole. Good night North Pole.
I said those already.
Oh, you didn't.
And I said Arctic Circle.
Ah, darn it. Good night. Oh, Guatemala. Good night, Yucatan Peninsula. Good night, Ecuador. Good night, Peru.
Good night, Galapagos Islands.
That's what it was. I was trying to say that, but I can't remember what it was. Good night, all the places along the Andes Mountains. Good night, all the places along the Alps. Sweden. Good night, Sweden.
I
Good
said
night,
that right.
Norway. Good night,
Good night, Hayden
Finland.
Panettiere.
Good night, Finland. Good night, Moscow. Good night. Can't think of any other countries.
Good night.
Good night. Good night, Mongolia.
There we go. Okay, we're done.
And Puerto Rico.
Oh, wait. What else? Persia. Good night, Persia. And Syria. And Syria and Babylon and New Babylon. And good night,
Good night, Syria. Actually, no, not Syria, but Syria. Good night, Syria.
Persia. Persia.
No, Persia isn't there anymore.
It's an area. I don't care. I'm
Good
just
night,
saying
Africa. All of it. Oh, good night, Zambania.
Okay, cool.
No, Zambia.
Zambia. Okay, awesome.
Zambia. All right, adios, peeps.
Bye-bye.